experience, which, in my opinion, you can't get experience without doing the job. But those are the main two things. That we need an experienced hand at the moment, and that he is not that.
Yeah, let me come back on, because initially Lulu mentioned the phrase that, a basket of goodies, right?
Yeah.
And that's not actually too far from the truth, because when Gotabaya, some of the conversations that were had, it's been reported in the press. It's not just the presidency, right? You get offers of cabinet positions for your team, for people in your party. So you can then imagine the internal pressure that Mr. Premadas would have had to take on the presidency from his own party members who said, take over the prime ministership, take this over, start running the country. There was a lot of pressure on him. And I think he repeated this recently as well, and he said that it's not about him becoming president. He was offered the presidency and by Maithripala Sirisena, many times, and he said that's not how he wants to take power.
Right.
In this occasion, he was, I think the TNA, the NPP, a couple of the opposition parties, they all got together and they said, right now the country's on fire. That was the context of the time. We wanted Gotabaya Rajapaksa out. People held him unequivocally responsible for what happened, and his departure, his exit was a non-negotiable. That was the context of the time. So in such a context, for the opposition leader to then just take over the premiership without any assurances from the president, that would be, going against the duty that he has to the people of Sri Lanka.
Right.
And that was what the conversations were. The letters that were exchanged were about a timeline for him to try to leave. Now, he was dead against giving a concrete timeline to leave.
And there was no date set for a premier to be appointed, right? I mean, it was open.
It was a discussion that was going on, a negotiation that was going on, to which Mr. Wickremesinghe, through the back door, essentially, took over the position.
What role did the BASL play in the whole
thing? The BASL had also laid out a structure for the present government's dissolution, for the exit of the president, for the exit of the prime minister, to do things in an orderly fashion.
I think we all saw it at the time, right? I mean, it was very much in line with the demands of the Aragalaya.
Yes.
And that was, the last desperate act of a desperate population, right?
The point is that there were multiple options on the table, but the common factor had to be that Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to resign. That was common.
Right.
The only person whose plan didn't have that aspect of it was Mr. Wickremesinghe.
Right.
So it's no surprise that Mr. Wickremesinghe then ascended to the premiership, right? So, and as a cynic, as someone that pays attention to politics, it's clearly part of a plan. It was a plan that was meant to discredit the main opposition and a plan to protect the Rajapaksa establishment.
Right.
Do you feel that it was never on the cards to offer it to anybody else other than Ranil Wickremesinghe?
I would be very, very surprised if they were to offer. I think what Gotabaya's worst case scenario was to put Mr. Premadas in that position, but to straitjacket it. And to have, I think the negotiations were that the cabinet would be about 70 to 80% port to it.
Yeah, I mean,
that was the conversation at the time.
So it has to be somebody transactional enough to
these are the conditions that people are asking Mr. Premadas to take. And Mr. Premadas said, sorry, there is a way to do this. If you want to do it this way, this is how we do it. In the end, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to flee, literally for his life. So that's where it is.
Right. So which happened in July. So this, what you're talking about was May.
Yes, that's right.
Which is when Mirihan happened and, the internet was taken down. And remember all the mess? That's when the young people got activated, right? When their TikTok was no longer working. So, no, really, that's basically when everybody started coming out, right?
And there's another narrative connected to this that he tried to put forward. Dala Salah Perum, who's also an SLP peer, and Dala Salah Perum is now part of the alliance of the Samvijana Balavega, the Samvijana Sandhana. So in terms of that, I mean, I think it's everyone who's
Well, that is in the presidential parliamentary election.
That's right. So I mean, at that point, his decision to withdraw was to ensure that they didn't, because there was an anti-Rajapaksa vote and a pro-Rajapaksa vote. In
I don't think anybody's naive enough
to
believe that there was a path for the SJB to come into power then, because the opposition had less than 60 seats at that time. So you had to have a significant breakaway.
Yeah, that's why we were calling for a general election as soon as possible. Even, because the idea, in fact, was to dissolve the presidency as soon as possible and move into a parliamentary system.
Okay, wait. So coming from the naive side then, is there no scenario where he did it for the good of the country?
Mr. Wickremesinghe or Mr. Gotabaya?
The heat coming off this side of the table. No, I'm just asking because that's everyone. He's a hero, right? For a lot of people.
I think you have to look at his track record, right? I mean, then you have to believe that he did it in good faith. That was a good faith decision in the interest of the country.
I mean, you have
right,
to.
So you have to ask yourself that, right?
You have to depend on the personal integrity of the person, right? At the end of the day, and I think whatever you say positively about Mr. Wickremesinghe, you can't deny the fact that he was going against the broad general will of the people.
Well,
so that's all we can. That's the only thing you can say about.
Yeah,
right?
Because the whole country was asking for change, like something meaningful, and the BSF plan.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to go.
Right, and then go home. Right, that was the primary battle cry, and then the rest of it was system change, which included getting rid of the executive presidency, and then elections and various other things. That change was only possible then. That sort of now we're just doing incremental stuff, right? Little by little.
Exactly right.
Something significant was possible then.
Yes.
That opportunity was squandered because Ranil took it with no conditions. Right?
And can I add to that?
Yeah, sure.
The incrementalism is also on display in our IMF program because the lack of political capital and popularity and public mandate that this government and Mr. Wickremesinghe has handicapped what he can achieve with the IMF.
Right.
That's why our revenue targets are as low as they are. That's why our debt to GDP is still 95% after 2-3 years. Yeah. It's because he can't push too far because he doesn't have a public mandate.
We used to say that a properly mandated government will have a better footing with the IMF. We used to say that back in the day. So let's move forward.
Yes.
Right. So basically, before we come to those specific questions, but it has to do with what she said. We did a comparison of the two manifestos.
Correct. Yeah.
We ran it through an AI engine. We didn't say that through the entire thing. So we said, look, find commonalities between the three main manifestos.
Yeah.
SJB and NPP has almost like 88% things in common. So really, all the mudslinging and all of that is over the balance, sort of 12%, right? I mean, I get it. And most of that is to do with like sort of social safety net and things like that, and on the economy and things like the independence of the central bank. There are specific areas.
Important areas are very different.
Specific important areas, and also things like military spending. Some have a bit more detail, others don't. It's a sacred cow.
On the subject of detail, I think even maybe they're broadly similar up to 80% or but the amount of detail in the SJB manifesto far exceeds that of the NPP manifesto. I read both. So, we have very specific
But Mantri.lk says in terms of measurable goals, NPP has more. Okay. I think it's something like 178 measurable goals, whereas SJB has something less. We can
on
look
the
that
SJB manifesto itself, there's a lot of things that are in the manifesto. There's a lot of things that aren't in the manifesto.
Right. No. So a lot of them are to do with social.
Why is that
indicators?
The basic question.
In terms of, for example, when it comes to the IMF, I find this issue as well. Like, I don't think we need to put forward your entire negotiating position because at the end of the day, they have to go into government and negotiate with the IMF. Yeah. So, for example, if you're talking about the program, there are certain things you will say and certain things you won't say. Like, there will be something that I can maybe say.
They can preempt you.
In a sense, it is a negotiation, right? At the end of the day, and whether you use the word competitive in the right way, it is a competitive negotiation to me.
Because there's still some cards.
Because it's not just the borrower and it's not just the lender. There's also these third parties, the private creditors, right? So there's a bit of a game that you have to play.
Right. So basically, summarizing the positions, what it said was NPP stood for more structural change, SJB for pragmatic reform, and Ranil was basically like business as usual. Like the same old kind of a thing. That was the broad kind of thing. How do you feel about that?
So I'll refer you to an article a few days ago from Professor W.A. Wijethilleke. He's a former central banker, deputy governor of the central bank, and an economist. He broke down the three main parties' manifestos into neoliberal, slightly less neoliberal, and statist. So just very broad terms, and I think this is how he measured it. I disagree with his categorization of the SJB policy, but I think the fact that he's mentioned that the NPP is more statist and wants more centralized control over the economy, more interventionism, that is a significant difference. So I can't say how the AI would have analyzed that, but when I analyze it, I do see I mean, the broad objectives are the same because Sri Lanka, I think the NPP and the SJB have both emphasized the need for Sri Lanka's exports to improve. But I would say the SJB is a little more, technical and a little more focused on that.
Right.
But again, I would understand why a program would say these are both going in the same direction. But the SJB believes more in the market, and I think the NPP believes more in the state, in how to organize the economy.
Right.
So,
I think people understand that, right? Like, far more to the left, and I think SJB a little bit more to the center.
Yes.
Question of the thing, some time ago, we used to say, stop attacking each other because you have a common enemy, right? And now with like a couple of days to the election, is there some regret that the opposition didn't work together to make sure that we don't have a continuation of the incumbency? Because ultimately, both the SJB and the NPP have promised to abolish the executive, which makes this election kind of redundant, whoever wins.
Well, you say it, right? But then everybody else...
Right? We used to say this all the time, right?
I mean,
stop fighting, like you guys stop flinging
like
mud
the
at each
most
other.
common narrative on Twitter is why isn't the SJB and Ranil Wickremesinghe getting together to fight the evil communists?
No,
but you brought up the other side.
We never saw it.
So this is the thing. So I mean, I don't really... Right. I said before off camera that I will not be voting for a second preference or a third preference. I will be voting for a single... and I think the SJB has also sort of not really pushed for voting for us as a second preference either. So I haven't seen that as a campaign. So I think
you're all out for a win. I mean, Chaturanga told us last time as well. They're all out for a win.
I don't blame people at home. For example, if you are genuinely worried about a communist takeover in Sri Lanka, you should vote accordingly, right? If you genuinely feel that the SJB are a socialist party and they're going to throw subsidies, then you should vote accordingly. I'm just saying personally, I will be voting for one person and I won't be giving a second preference.
Right.
Because I mean, it's just, for me, it's a matter of, I don't believe that the current trajectory is working and I don't see a reasonable enough alternative in the NPP. And so for me, it's fairly straightforward to vote for the SJB.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the next set of questions, I'm paraphrasing. This is not our opinion or the group's opinion. This is actually picked from Lulu's IG comments and replies she posted publicly. We've kept the people's names anonymous.
That's why I think people were so eager to share because I promised I know who everyone is. I have all the...
So these are the broad sentiments that were expressed, which we put down into a bunch of questions.
Right.
First, obviously, is the one that Lulu was talking about. Did they run away from responsibility? If not Ranil, then whom? This is the primary accusation against the SJB, right?
I think the very important thing they're asking is what would have happened, right? So even at the point of being offered the premiership, I wasn't personally foreseeing a situation where Gotabaya Rajapaksa would have to run away from this situation, right? I didn't foresee that. Even though things were getting a bit hairy in and around the suburbs, I didn't see that level of violence, right? Even still, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa had a responsibility to step down. He was trying to do this without stepping down or trying to elongate his position. So I think the idea that they're not taking responsibility misses the point. We were trying to achieve something very specific at that time, like we spoke before. The idea at that time was to start afresh with a new government. Now people may say that's impractical, etc. That's a million. Now even this election, it's happening in a few days' time, right? There's also a budget to pass at the end of this year. There's an IMF review to happen. The IMF review is actually in and around the same time period. They may have to put the review back and that might delay the disbursement. So there are all sorts of complications, but there's no situation where we would have not had a government because there's always a fallback in the constitution and there's always a process to follow. But Mr. Wickremesinghe simply wanted to get into that seat because he knew once you're into the Prime Minister's seat, there's a lot of pressure on Gotabaya to go. It's only a matter of time before I become president. It was his calculation.
He stepped up.
And it's not that Mr. Premadasa didn't know that.
Right.
Mr. Premadasa knew there was a very good chance for him to become president very quickly, maybe in a matter of weeks. But he said, no, there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and I'm not going to go against. And besides, the majority of the party was also saying, no, take it, but ask Gotabaya to step down in a reasonable time frame. Don't take it without that. That was also the majority feeling in the party. So again, he can't go against the party, he can't go against the people. The only people he disappointed were maybe, there may be a few people. I think in the party there may be a few people, but the majority, I think Mr. Premadasan had
the ones who were disappointed left and joined the other side anyway. So that is absolute. So if not Ranil, then who becomes a pertinent question, because I think he was the only one prepared to take this on without any preconditions.
Yeah, I mean
that is the fact.
If not Ranil, I think the idea was that according to the constitution, the speaker according to the Basel option was that the speaker was going to temporarily be a non-executive president, right? And then have Parliament run the affairs of government, and at the earliest, stabilize things, and at the earliest possible time have a.
I mean, I have opinions on it, but since nobody's interviewing me, I'm not going to keep it to myself. No, but I mean, in the sense, I feel strongly, I think like we all do. Go ahead.
No, but I saw, who is this, Mahinda Rajapaksa mentioning in one of his meetings, he said, no, we appointed him.
They said that.
We openly said that.
Yeah, I mean,
we appointed him.
Right. Subsequently,
not subsequently, said we appointed him, not that he came.
No, he took credit for the fact that he was there.
Because they have an arrangement so that the Rajapaksas will be looked after.
Right. I mean, I think
it did happen when he...
Reading between the lines, we can sort of see all of that going down. See, the thing is, we are a group that came together in support of the Aragalaya, right? Like, we actually really believe in the ideas. We believe that was a very significant moment in the country where so much happened, right? Got rid of a prime minister, cabinet, a central bank governor, and eventually a president, right? The whole cabinet, right? So that is not nothing.
And now the conversation around the Aragon has become quite cynical.
Cynical, because people built a power center.
Yeah.
The incumbent culture needs to destroy that.
That's right.
Right.
That's
because
exactly
that is dangerous to them.
Exactly right.
So they at any cost will demean, we've been labelled all sorts of things, right? What are the names you've been called? What are the names you've been called? So because of that, the betrayal of those ideals that happened on the day he took the premiership is one of the reasons for me is disqualifying. That this continues. So these meager forced stability narratives and all that really doesn't sell.
So Mr. Vikram Singh's career is defined by this guy. So he ran for the first half of his career, basically trying to negotiate with the LTTE, right? Now, whether you agree, disagree, the majority of the country did not see that as the solution, because most people assumed that Prabhakaran, especially, is a maximalist person. He's got his idea of Elam. He's not going to budge from that. So that was the first part of his career. The second part of his career, now he's changed to the other side, where he's now talking about how it's up to the people. We shouldn't have foreign investigators if the government doesn't want it. So people have to judge for themselves.
Let's get to that point about who's he surrounded by, because that question is going to come about the SJB as well. So what the next question is, why isn't Sajid facing the media? Now, even yesterday, there was a story that he was supposed to come to like he doesn't want to talk to people live. Is he afraid?
Yeah, I mean,
because the story is like he's afraid, like he ran away before. He's not facing the media.
Over the last 3 or 4 years, he's done multiple live interviews. He did one this year with Mahesh Johnny of the Other Network in English. Yeah. He did one in Hiru with Sinhala quite recently, like a week ago or something. Yeah. So this is just under Derana. Because of the campaign stops that they have to make, it was always going to be complicated to get him at that time. Yeah. And he had said, I'll try tentatively. And then, I think several days early, he had said he can't. And then also, I think they had said there's another show and that they'll appear in that show. So there was some kind of confusion. But again, the media likes to make a drama of this, right? So they want to show that empty seat and show that, he's not willing to come for a debate. But again, the media narratives are there, so he's sat for plenty of interviews. Yeah. He's made himself available multiple times too. He's answered questions live. People were saying, can you imagine him answering questions live? I said, yes, every single event we have, policy launch, he answers questions.
Also in Parliament,
he does that, yeah. But I mean, he took audience questions without being prompted, so... Right. I mean, it happens, I've seen it, it's on YouTube, you can watch it if you want. So.
Yeah, but in the war of rhetoric, nobody can beat the NPP.
Yeah, no, I understand.
You know what I mean?
But
so
credit to them.
These days there's a lot of comparative things happening, right? People are comparing one against the other in terms of rhetoric. I watched the debate, the economic debate that the Chamber of Commerce had. Dr. Harshana, his rhetoric was excellent. But then he lost the room because that rhetoric in front of that audience didn't work.
Well, he didn't answer the question straight, right? He was asked a straight question, didn't give a straight answer.
Yeah,
I was there in the room. I mean, people were gasping because he had one question.
Two options. Because the rhetoric was stronger than the actual on substance.
Whatever
there.
you do, if you ask the question and you have to give a straight answer, give the straight answer. But and despite the policies being, he knew the manifesto was. I think the manifesto was out at the time as well, so he knew what their stance was.
No, they launched the manifesto about 2 days later. No?
But he knew what they voted for when it came to the Central Bank Act. He knew that the party voted against. So why didn't he just say it? Just accept it, own that policy. So, I mean, again...
even SJB was not quite straightforward on that at the beginning, because I think Iran voted against and Harsha voted for.
Only Iran voted against, and Iran is from the banking fraternity, and I can briefly explain. I think the Central Bank Act, I'm supportive of it. The main problem that the Central Bank Act is trying to fix is this excessive money printing issue, right? Money printing comes with the Monetary Board. The Monetary Board was previously appointed by, I think, and the Monetary Board previously had the Secretary to the Treasury on the Monetary Board. And it was appointed directly by members of the Finance Ministry. So now I think they have taken the Monetary Board and made it a little more strict, where I think the Finance Minister has one nominee, the President has another nominee, etc. So they've tried to help. So even there, Mr. Ran Wickramaratne had certain technical issues with it, but he knew it was going to pass. So as to kind of show that he had a protest against certain aspects of it, he voted against it. But I think the party is very clear about the independence of the central bank.
And that came through in the debate. Harsha was the most assertive, and he came.
Yeah, I mean the fact that we have to pass legislation in Parliament to say that our central bank has to be independent tells you everything you need to know about where you are. The central bank is conceptually meant to be an independent organization, right, above politics, above the Parliament, but.
So the next question, moving from that, why is the SJB promoting the team and not the candidate? That's the other question that's been asked.
If you ask some people in the SJB, some of the team members,
because
they'll say that they're not being promoted enough and that it's only Sajid Premadasa. So, but I think, there's two things, right?
Because they might not even get elected, right? There's an election to come in 2 months.
Yeah, but I think the fact of the matter is that the people in the team, the economic team, Mr. Kabir Hashim, Mr. Ran Wickramaratne, Dr. Harsha De Silva, are people that have earned a certain amount of integrity.
Nobody questions.
They have that integrity in the public, right? And I can tell the viewer, all of them at various times have said to me and to others that they have received personal invitations and incentives from members of the government, including directly from Ranil Wickremesinghe, to come and join the government, right? And imagine someone like Mr. Ran Wickramaratne or someone like Dr. Harsha De Silva. You've spent your entire life in politics. This is your opportunity to do something in a big cabinet position. But yet, they don't, instead of working in government with Mr. Wickremesinghe, they would rather stick with Mr. Premadasa without any promise of anything. That tells you everything you need to know. Is that the leader and the team have a symbiotic understanding, right? And they play off each other. And I would submit to your listeners and audience, think about what we're saying. Mr. Wickremesinghe is one person. Even if he was the most talented, smartest person that most Ranis believe him to be, is he really telling me that this one person can be president during an economic crisis, the finance minister during debt negotiations, and the defense minister, and some other ministries that he holds? This is ridiculous. He needs a team, and he doesn't have a team. And I think the situation we are in reflects the fact of his team.
But he has consultants, 92.
There's a lot.
Consultants,
Actually, towards the end, if you have time, let's go into the scenario where, what happens, should there be another, what happens next?
Sure.
In terms of what does he try to reform the UNP? Does all those ministers who are following him now renounce the SLPP? We can get into that. We can get into that.
I'll just quickly say that the whole reason Mr. Wickremesinghe is running is not because he thinks he can win. It's to make sure that he can break away enough votes from Mr. Premadasa to say that, look, Mr. Premadasa is not fit to lead. Come back to me and join the UN. That's his whole game.
Bit of a vendetta going there.
It is,
Okay, so we have the team. Also, there's a lot of talk about the wife and the sister.
Okay,
sure. People share clips of them saying these are people who take away a lot of votes. They're vote breakers for Sajid. That's the narrative.
Yeah, I saw the video of her walking with GLPs at the back, and they were giving a salute. I think the idea was that the salute was for the Member of Parliament. That's the protocol. Yeah. Of course, she as the leader of the party's wife was walking in front, so it made it look like the salute was for her. Now, I am personally completely against family members being, if for example I was a cabinet member or an MP, if I have an office, I shouldn't staff it with my family members. It's very clear. Mr. Premadasa's history in politics, I was being in politics for 25 years. If you can show me major positions held by members of his family, his sister, his mother, whoever you want to show me the position. I mean, people blame his mother for taking the president's thing. So it's something that she's due. So, and she takes it. I don't think she's nowhere near the most extravagant spender from that fund anyway, right? So I think people always hope, and I think within the party also we know that there'll be a lot of issues within the party if there are family members of party members, including the leader, in important positions. That's not going to be how the SJB operates.
Should he get elected? Do you see them as being an impediment to his ability to govern?
I think generally speaking, Mr. Premadasa has shown almost to a fault some level of independent-mindedness, right? That's kind of the thing. If he was an independent-minded, he would have probably been the Prime Minister under Gotabaya Rajapaksa and then later on become President. He's someone who I think has a certain idea, and it's not easy to shake him from that. Right. So
also, you can't be an outspoken woman in this country, right? And not get some backlash.
I also kind of made that point. I mean, a woman campaigning, the wife campaigning for the husband. I mean,
is that uncommon?
No. In the sense, like she has the right to do that, and because she's a strong woman who goes in front and all of that, she gets all this pushback. I mean, it's just personality, I guess.
I agree. One thing, you don't want family, right? Yeah. The other thing is you don't want friends who are not qualified. Yeah. So then Mr. Wickramasinghe, every time he's in power, Mr. Sagar Ratnaik is also in some high position, right? So there are plenty of people that Mr. Wickramasinghe promotes in every single administration of his, may not be family members, but they're royalists, shall we say Loyalists, exactly. So, I mean...
that brings us to the next point. Right now, there were so many crossovers. I mean, we understand a certain amount of political horse trading.
Yes.
But what is the value in bringing certain of the Pohottua members into the SJB fold?
We spoke about this last time as well.
We did, because now
we didn't have Geeta.
Geeta has come.
Who has come?
Geeta has. So,
it takes a village, I don't know, to run a political party. Look, I mean, I'll be honest, when I voted for the SJB in 2020, when the SJB formed as a supporter, now as a member, there are people in the SJB that I don't like that I completely disagree with, that I don't understand how they are in politics in the first place. That's been the case of every party I've supported in, it's only the UNP that I've supported in Sri Lanka's political history. And as if the UNP was full of upstanding people. Right now,
I mean, that criticism I won't take from a Ranil supporter because he's surrounded. But
I understand.
But
let me,
from an NPP, it's a fair criticism. Right?
The other point
NPP hasn't taken it.
The other point is that it's not like Mr. Godehev has come in and completely revamped the SJB's ideology. It's not that he has. Can you show me any input that he's had, obvious input that he's had into the manifesto? Has he affected the way the party presents itself?
Can I ask something?
So.
Have they been promised anything?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know personally. That's well below my pay grade.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised. I mean, think about it. The SJB already has a fair number of quite talented individuals. It's got a fair number of very senior politicians as well. The SJB, in its manifesto, has also said that there will be no jumbo cabinet. They will go according to the constitution, and the cabinets, the names and the ministries of the cabinet will be according to the constitution. No special cabinets for X and Y friend. In which case, there will be limited positions for these people anyway. And there will be a huge problem in the working committee if people who are from outside the Samik Jana Balavege main party are then given powerful positions. I don't think Mr. Premdas will do that.
So, you yourself said that there are problematic people in the party. Right? I mean,
in every party.
In every party, but how serious can the SJB be about accountability, knowing that there are problematic people there, right? Would they use the nominating process at the next general, for example, make sure that they don't nominate anybody with open cases, with convictions?
I think we pledged that. I think we pledged that people with open cases will not, with corruption will not be in the government, will not be part of the administration. I think that they're very clear. In terms of, I think our politics has this problem, right, where everyone wants to be a big tent party towards election time, right? I would always suggest look at the policies, look at the people joining, and see their impact, and understand that some of politics is for placeholding and horse trading. Some of it's because now, for example, maybe GL Pires has input in terms of being a legal mind. He is one of our country's top legal scholars. I don't think there's anybody who's going to doubt that,
he's
right?
written how many books we discussed.
Yeah, so he's got genuine input that he can make into the party. Then you take someone like Dr. Godehev and you can have your own opinion on that. Yeah. What I'm saying is, do you see any of them impacting the party? No, so when the last time I came here, I challenged the audience to show me how it's impacted the party's policies. Yeah. And right now, even today, I don't see that it's impacted the party's policies. Right. It doesn't, I mean, for me, I don't like it. I get it. Yeah. I'm with you on that. But again, there are people who make that. So again, with the leadership.
No, because last time when you were here, you talked about building a big tent, right?
Yeah,
so I said tent building, and that clip has been used over and over again to attack me.
But that I have to stand by that, right? And at the end of the day, parties and administrations are, the leadership makes a big difference. So ask yourself about the UNP leadership, ask yourself about the people in the Pohotwa leadership, and ask yourself about the NPP leadership, and then check the 4 or 5 people that I mentioned in the SJB,
right?
And you decide who.
Staunch Ranilists making arguments against like crooks and problematic people, I can just let it just wash over me because they're surrounded in, you know what I mean? When you're covered in filth, you can't say,
And I'm happy to give, because the SJB is not a party where we all hang our hat and hang our head and say yes to everything the leader says. Yeah. You can ask me live with any audience what I think of any member of the SJB and I'll be completely honest with you. I've got no problem with that.
Shall we put him to the test?
Go for it. You can mention names and ask me what I think of them. I'll be very honest.
And I hear before that.
Go on. Yeah.
No, so we were talking about themes, about what people think about the SJB. And the other one, and this is above anything else, above the taking responsibility for the country, coming off the back of the Easter bombings, of COVID, of fuel shortages, of gas shortages, of Aragalaya. Everyone is saying this is not the time to experiment. And what I'm understanding it to mean is that any change in government or any change in president is somehow going to set us back into queues, back into shortages. How is that? What is that?
That particular comment is more in relation to the NPP. Reading even your ones.
Across the board, all of them.
Yeah, what's the point in changing also?
I have made the point that if you want similar economic policies minus Ranil, you have to choose SJB.
I wouldn't even agree with that. I wouldn't even agree with that. I completely contest that as well.
But I liken it to a PTSD response. Like people are just wanting safety and stability and security. Is that a fair thing?
Can I answer that?
Of course.
So
I'm only asking you, Sam, but I'm asking you.
I'll tell your story, but I'll repeat it. Okay, so
I have it here if you want to read it.
The idea is that things for me are stable. My life has improved from 2 years ago. I don't want my immediate material conditions have improved, and I don't want any changes to mess that up. So, completely logical. Anyone can look at their immediate surroundings and vote based on that. Absolutely no problem. But then you can't look at the 6.9 million who voted for Gota and point fingers at them, because they also voted based on at the time, based on their material conditions that had deteriorated under Ranil Wickremesinghe's government. They saw the government that was not working, the economy that was down, growth that was down, terrorist attacks, bomb scams, and they said, my material conditions aren't any better. These people are robbing the country. Let's vote for Gota. So they are also voting on a very, just looking around at your immediate surroundings. So that's also fair.
Yeah.
But I would advise people to maybe look a little bit deeper at what is happening and consider the current trajectory and vote on that basis.
Gota promised vistas of prosperity. Right?
No, I mean, intellectually I understand your answer, because it is, you have to understand the motivations of those people. Yeah. But what I'm asking you is there going to be a change?
Right. So in terms of this, there's 2 ways to look at this. First of all, everybody has to ask themselves, how convinced are you of this current trajectory? And I know if you read the news, if you read the Financial Times, most of 70 to 80% of the writing in the articles will say, yes, we are on the right track, we shouldn't change anything, everything should be good. Now, Just take a few things like the tax structure, the debt deal, right? The IMF program's targets. There is so much international expertise that has commented on these things independently. There are members of the SJB, there are Kusum, there are people who look at this stuff for a living. So there are things that are suboptimal in the current trajectory. And there's also a conceptual flaw in what Mr. Vikram Singh is trying to do. Because Mr. Vikram Singh is a neoliberal. He doesn't believe in an industrialized export economy, even though he keeps saying it. Yeah. You can always tell when someone keeps saying the words industrialized export economy, but never has any policies to back that up. You know they're not serious about this. So I would advise people at home, dig deep into the trajectory, understand that your stability might be superficial, and that there are a million ways that we can achieve the same targets of the IMF. It's not only one way.
I come at this problem from a different angle. When you're talking about your stability, the fact that you are okay at purchasing groceries at 3 times the price, gas at 3 times the price. Yeah. If you can afford to live at this cost of living, that means you're privileged. Yeah. You come from a certain place of privilege. 7 million people are in poverty. Childhood malnutrition is at an all-time high. Childhood wasting is going on in this country
right now.
In a place where I can actually buy groceries and pay. I can pay whatever for groceries and go home, and I don't want my stability disturbed.
Exactly.
But at what cost?
1 billion electricity.
Right? Electricity disconnections. There are social indicators that tell us that we are not in a good place. That's why this current campaign is built on the stability narrative. They talk about inflation and not cost of living, right? So that is where
And if I can add one more thing,
sure.
Mr. Vikram Singh has been here before. So for me, this is like deja vu because literally in 2015, 2016, this is exactly what he tried, a revenue-based fiscal consolidation with the IMF. In the end, we didn't improve our debt sustainability. We didn't improve our revenue to GDP. And he failed to govern the country in an efficient manner. So now you want him to do the exact same thing, and the same results are coming. We haven't met the revenue target a single time. Our debt isn't any more sustainable. The IMF program doesn't even guarantee debt sustainability according to their own DSA. So these are things that you have to look at.
And the big sort of issue with Yahapal was the bond scam.
And it happened a few months after they came to power.
After 2 years in power, with what's happened with Adani, what's happened with the visa issue. And this is in just 2 seconds.
Guys, the VFS issue is killing me because the VFS issue came to cabinet.
It's so clear cut.
And it's like, you have a cabinet paper in front of you. How many people do we have on the cabinet? We have about 20-25 people, right? Did none of them look at this paper and say, why are we giving away 100% of revenue that's meant to come to our country, the visa fees? Why are we giving it to a private company? What is the basis for this? And ladies and gentlemen at home, Mr. Vikram Singh is the head of the cabinet. He should be amongst the first people to read this cabinet paper. He should be answering the questions, not palming it off to Tiran Nalas. Tiran Nalas's fate should be decided by the president. The president should say, Tiran, what is this cabinet paper you brought? Can you explain this to the public and explain this to me? Have you seen any of that? No. He's mum on that. But now he goes on stage and says, in my opinion, governance is second because the economy is first. Not understand that governance and the economy are intrinsically linked. You can't separate the two. If you try to build an economy without governance structures, it will collapse. And that's exactly what happened to us.
Right. So we'll come to a little bit. Any more on that? Okay. So then the next question is, SJB takes dark money. About the whole, circular and the buses. That you don't reveal the donors. This is a constant sort of a complaint against the SJB, right? That is dark money and that it's also a form of corruption. How do you answer?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, right, if you take the full amount for Sakwala, for the buses, you come to tens of billions, let's say, right? It's not like there's 2 or 3 people doling out a few billion. That's not what's happening. There's literally hundreds of donors, okay? And it's not that when this program started 3 years ago, some of the programs. And the first program was, if I'm not mistaken, HUSMA, which were ventilators for hospitals during COVID, right? And no one is saying, I'm certainly not going to say that this is completely altruistic and charitable and nothing to do with politics. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I'm not going to insult
you're building a political brand.
I'm building a political brand. But several political brands have been built in this country, right? Have any of them done the kind of, provided the material benefits to some of the poorest people in this country? They haven't, okay? And for example, if there's a Sakula program, a smart classroom, each smart classroom can cost between 1 million and 1.5 million rupees. So when you have a date coming up, let's say 2-3 months in advance, the office of the opposition leader sends out a note to X number of donors. Then at that point, you're only trying to raise 1.5 million rupees. And I'm telling you, the opposition leader has enough of a phone book where he can raise 1.5 million for the school. And that money doesn't come to the party, it doesn't come to his personal account. The donors send the money to the supplier sends the supplies to the school. And it's a pretty good way to do this. If there was, billions coming to the party account and the party's account is dispersing funds to suppliers and then sending it to the school, I agree that's more of a problem. And I'm not saying that 100% of these people who are donating money are doing it without anything, not wanting anything in return. But I'm saying that I trust the leadership to ensure that any kind of thing that you're doing for someone is not detrimental to the country and to their policies. And most of the SJB is very careful. I mean, it's a moderate party that doesn't want to do anything too crazy, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, if some donor somewhere says, I want some contract or something, it's not going to happen. I mean,
first of all, again, like this criticism coming from the people it's coming from, it's not entirely like genuine.
Sure.
But the thing is, if a party says we're going to be transparent, it should start with the party.
I agree.
Transparency has to come from the party itself.
The donors are against their names being given out, right?
That's what even Prashant told us when we met Prashant. He said he wouldn't disclose the donor list either because then other people hound them for
nobody wants to has Ranil Wickremesinghe for his 45 years in politics. Do you know who's been, I mean, we kind of know who's been like funding him. Who keeps the lights on at City Kota? I mean, just ask the question, right? Who's been funding the Pohot tour, which is the best funded party in this country, which has never done any sort of social welfare program for the people of this country or the school system or the health system. So, I mean, this is, but by the way, I am personally, and the SJB is as well, for restricting campaign finance, even more than it is right now. Yeah. I personally believe in public funded campaigns, where everybody has the same amount of money, where you don't bring private money into. There should not, in my opinion, there should be no private funding of elections at all, period. So, but
are we happy with that answer?
It's the best one I got, guys.
With regard to favors, since you mentioned that, I mean, there's talk now that people are talking about how people are monitoring, unlike earlier, the media and how they offer publicity to different candidates. Hiru, that's right.
Yeah.
So the talk is that it's a deal. The deal
guys,
is that Rainer is going to get some benefit for his brother.
No, the benefit is the presidential pardon. Right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, look. If Mr. Premadasa...
But first, if you look at the monitoring, Hiru is offering more publicity to...
Yeah.
So explain it, just tell us...
I think Hiru probably knows a winner when they see one. Right? That's one way I would put it. Right?
And we're going to make a politician of you.
They are also not very worried about the ratings kind of thing, are they? They're not... They have their own game being played. They know their market. And I think they see that their market is probably pulling for Sajid Premadasa, and that maybe they're reacting to that. So in the similar way, you can see ITN and Rupawahini, and they are giving the majority of their coverage to...
No doubt there. So, that's always been the case. I mean,
but on the presidential pardon for Mr. Duminda Silva, who is convicted of murder...
It's already been adjudicated by...
Invite me back on your show if Mr. Premadasa gives him pardon, and I'll blast him myself personally, right? So... That's okay. All right. That's there to be said. I'll resign from the party if there's a presidential pardon given to a murderer. For anybody, for any murderer.
We'll bookmark that one.
Yeah, bookmark
that one.
I noticed something. Sorry, News First doesn't give any priority to Mr. Premadasa. I never seen even the advertisements coming.
I made this point in an article about 3 or 4 years ago, at the point of this government, where all the news channels, not just Sirsa, they would divide their news coverage, because I watch all the news. The news coverage is divided, ruling party, so SLPP, then SJB, slightly less coverage, and then NPP, slightly less coverage, and then UNP, probably the least coverage.
Yeah.
But it's not proportionate to their representation in parliament, right? SLPP has a huge base. SJB had 50 plus seats, 55 seats. The NPP has 3 seats. The UNP had 1 seat. How do they get so much coverage compared to the party with 50 seats? they have, roughly the same amount of coverage, I would say.
No, News First.
News, I can't speak for News First.
It's really, it's...
No, something that I noticed. Yeah. They never show such a...
Yeah, but
only running live, they are...
They give coverage to...
I can only say for News First.
GGY probably takes the coverage.
In terms of News First, I can only say that I've been invited on more by News First than any other channel. So they've had me on to represent the SJB quite a lot.
Yeah, you've been on recently as well, no?
I've been on
yesterday
a couple days ago, yeah.
So, I'm talking about advertisements.
Yeah, no. Okay. I don't doubt that. I think I saw the analysis also showed that.
Another question is, today I saw a little exchange between you and Jeevan Thundama.
Yeah, that was fun, yeah.
They traditionally are with every government, right? So, Jeevan comments about past support for Gota and current support for Ranil. Why shouldn't his community listen to him just like the TNA listens to in the North and East?
It's not about whether his community should listen to him or not. It's about whether the people should trust the word of the party that supported Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his manifesto explicitly, right? And now they are saying explicitly Ranil's manifesto is the best manifesto. This is what they've said about Gota's manifesto also. So I'm just saying you are completely wrong about Gotabaya. I would have a little more humility when you're promoting another manifesto just a few years later. I would be a little humble about it. Yeah. And with full disclosure, Mr. Jeevan Thundama is a friend of mine. We're from the same sort of social circuit, shall I say. I've met him quite a few times. I know him a little bit. And he's a promising politician. But I have to say that some of the things, I saw a video of his recently where he talked about Mr. Wickramasinghe and his support for Mr. Wickramasinghe. And some of it's just factually, incorrect. He said something like, Mr. Wickramasinghe has always put the interests of the country first, right? And I just thought to myself, this is after the bond scam. This is after everything that happened with Daragalaya, how he destroyed those unarmed protesters with total violence from the military. Yeah. This is WikiLeaks reported. This is not Kusum saying it. WikiLeaks reported that he told the Japanese ambassador to ask Japan to stop assistance to Sri Lanka. Does that sound like someone who puts his country first? It's a bit ridiculous. Now, I understand the CWC is part of our political system, and I understand Mr. Thundama, to provide for his people, it's always better to be in the government. But I would ask the audience to decide what that says about our politics. That for a politician to serve his people, the only way for them to do that is to go and plug themselves into a government, regardless. Now, imagine Mr. Thundama's plight. He is representing a minority, one of the most underprivileged minorities in the country. But because of our political system, he has no choice but to plug himself to Gotabaya Rajapaksa in 2019, because they were clearly going to win, apparently, right? And Gotabaya Rajapaksa, this is post-Alut government, right? Post-BBS.
Yeah.
Representing the most ultra-nationalist, racist, nativist part of our country.
Yeah.
And the CWC had to plug themselves to it. So I don't blame Mr. Thundama or the CWC. I think this is sort of the problem with our political system. But I have to say that if you're going to support Mr. Wickramasinghe, you have to come at it from a different angle. I think saying that, for example, he's more efficient than the opposition leader. The opposition leader and Ranil Premadasa ran in the same electorate in 2020. And Mr. Wickramasinghe got less than 10,000 votes, and Mr. Sajid Premadasa won 330,000 votes. Yeah. Mr. Sajid Premadasa took a brand new party and decimated Sri Lanka's oldest party in the space of 5 months. You talk about the black money or whatever you want to call it. He has distributed smart classrooms to 350 plus schools. He has donated over ₹1 billion in medical equipment during the height of a pandemic. Right? Can you point me to something that Mr. Wickramasinghe has done something in his entire political career? He was opposition leader throughout my entire life. Has he done anywhere close to the service that Mr. Premadasa has done to the people of the country as opposition leader? Absolutely not. Right? Absolutely not. So I have to respectfully disagree with my friend Jeevan Thundama and the CWC member I spoke to. I think that it's very important that we be humble about what we are doing in politics, because there's no space to sort of, we were wrong last time around, but trust us this time. That's not a serious argument to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, he also represents a very downtrodden community, and he's a third generation politician.
The CWC were the kingmakers back in the day.
Right, back in the day, and they have been a part of every government that has ever existed in this country.
So my point is not this, it's this, Chalinda, if I was Jeevan Thonpal, whoever I was, whatever, if you're sitting in and around government during 2021-22, and you didn't raise your voice about the tax cuts, you didn't raise your voice about the government not going to the IMF, you didn't stand up on TV and the news and say, you know what, I think we need to change course, I think we need to revisit this manifesto. If you didn't stand up and make those points, for you to now be in front of a camera and say Ranil is the best, etc., without accepting responsibility for the mistakes that you made, for me, that's not the kind of politics that I like to see in our country. I think we can do much better than that, personally.
Okay. So, let's move to the Ranilist sort of narratives about, how do you, we spoke a little bit about some of this stuff, about the whole stability narrative. How do you view that? Because that seems to be the main theme that they're running on right now.
Yeah.
Saying that, this is, don't upset this, it's fragile.
Stability is fine if you're restricting your imports, if you're not paying if you're not meeting all your financial commitments. There'll be a certain amount of stability, but for how long, right? Sri Lanka's problem is not a cost problem. Sri Lanka's problem is a revenue problem. And he's failed to meet the revenue targets, I think all except one quarter so far in this current IMF program. He's failed to meet the social assistance spending targets of the IMF. He's failed to protect Sri Lanka's poorest. And there is international literature, scholarship by economists with proper accreditation who are looking at our debt restructuring program and our IMF deal, and they're saying this is suboptimal. There's a lot of things that are wrong with this program. So don't take my word for it. Yeah. Stability is superficial. It will be short-lived unless we attack the roots of our economic problem, which is our trade deficit and our under-diversified exports sector.
And we would say even the governance crisis, right?
The governance crisis is central to this.
Central to all that. We'll come to that at the end. So, now, both the SJB and the NPP has said they're going to abolish the executive presidency, which the president hasn't said. In fact, they make the case that they need it to come out of the economic crisis. Do you view it that way?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
The executive presidency.
Right.
SJB and NPP said they will abolish it. But the administration says they need it to come out of the crisis, that the economic crisis, you need the power of the
It's a tough question for me to answer, Chaminda, because I'm a little bit... I have a divergent viewpoint on this. I don't necessarily believe in abolishing the presidency as a whole. I think taking executive powers away from the presidency is good.
Yeah.
I kind of like a directly elected president, but I want that president to have zero powers within the legislature.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be able to walk into parliament and make speeches. He can be a head of state. That's what a lot of countries have, a ceremonial president who's a head of state. So something like that, that's my personal thing. But the SJB is very clear.
Yeah, but right now, I mean, the presidency is so powerful. It's usurping the power of the legislature, right? I mean, just the fact that he's the finance minister.
Yeah, you can't do that.
The power of the purse is meant to be with the parliament. And also, blatantly ignoring the judiciary, right? Like, so, we have a rule of law issue there as well. So
it comes down to governance,
way too
right?
Powerful,
it comes down to governance. You can't have such a overarching powerful office in this system that's already being manipulated, right? Then you're basically putting someone on top and incentivizing people to sort of go up to him and get what they want done because this guy's all powerful. That office is all powerful.
Yeah.
Definitely no, we can't have that. I would also caution that the NPP only quite recently have sort of come to this abolishing the executive presidency thing.
But it's in the manifesto.
It's in the manifesto now. But
yeah.
Andrukumar Dissanayaka's discourse throughout his career has not been this. Same with the 30th Amendment and the devolution of power. Very recently, they have said yes to devolution of power in the 30th Amendment.
Yeah.
But even last year, I remember on a stage, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya said she supports the 30th Amendment, but Tilvin Silva, or was it Lalkantha, whoever followed her, said, my colleague believes that's a personal point of view, but as a party, we don't believe in the 30th Amendment nor devolution of power. So I think you should take that.
We need to ask that from Chaturanga and we get a clarification there.
Another thing you should probably ask Chaturanga when he comes is about the decision-making process within the NPP, right? The NPP's main constituent is the JVP. The JVP has multiple layers of committees that make decisions.
Yeah.
If Andrukumar Dissanayaka is appointed as the president, the executive president, is his decision-making going to be based on the council and the committee and the Politburo of the JVP? How much independence does he have from the JVP and the NPP?
Yeah.
And also there are differences between the NPP and the JVP, right? The JVP is a Leninist Marxist Communist Party and the NPP is positioning itself as a left of centre progressive party. There's a huge gap between those two ideologies. So I think
in fact, we have a question on that.
Yeah.
So then what Lulu mentioned earlier about experimenting, that's the other case that they make, saying, don't mess around with what's already fixed. So possibly ruin the fragile recovery.
Let me tell the audience that in 2020, Dr. Harshil, when the SJB and Mr. Premadasa said, go to the IMF. In 2021, they said, look at restructuring your debt. In 2022, we said this tax structure is regressive. We said introduce a new slab. We said there's no high enough personal income tax, marginal income tax rate. We said corporate income tax to GDP is not enough. All of that now they are agreeing with. The IMF themselves have come and said reform your capital gains tax, something that I've been personally saying for the last 2 years. The SJB is actually the most responsible in terms of financial policy. In terms of being a responsible custodian of the government, just look at the profiles of the people on the economic committee and tell me that there are a better set of hands in our politics to manage public policy.
In fact, I think the biggest plus for the SJB is that I think most people acknowledge that on the economy.
But can I tell you, for me, the main attraction to the SJB has been the leader, Sajid Premadasa. Yeah. I said this in a tweet, and I said this on national TV a couple of days ago, that he's the only liberal politician I've seen that emphasizes the poor, that really focuses on poverty, extreme poverty, moving people up the socio-economic ladder. Yeah. Why? Not because, he's a good person, or not because of his Buddhistic values. Because he understands, as most people do, that unless you raise the lowest rung in your economy, the entire economy is going to struggle. Unless you have equitable growth, growth is going to collapse. The more people that come into extreme poverty, the more chance there is for political instability, right? That's why it's important to improve poverty, not because it makes us feel better, right? It's because it's good for everyone. It's better for the entire economy. If people are more educated, if people have healthcare, if people aren't going into debt trying to educate their children, that's what we need in this country. Yeah. Look at, when you talk about neoliberalism, it's not just trade and state and all this. Clear things. One of the main impacts of neoliberalism has been a downward trend in public state investments in education, healthcare. What else is a mark of neoliberalism? Is rising personal debt for those same things, for healthcare, for education. Sometimes for consumption. People in Sri Lanka right now are going into debt for consumption. They're pawning jewelry to have a little fest for their...
Basically, markets dictate everything.
Exactly.
Right?
So
with no state intervention.
We are in a situation where it's not sustainable. Like we said, unless you have a leader that really understands the poor and understands how to help them, we're not... And remember, people say that, the SJB is all about freebies. Show me in the manifesto the freebies. In fact, Mantri.lk and Public Finance, they released a study on all three manifestos, and they showed the revenue increasing policies, the revenue decreasing policies, and it's on Mantri on the Instagram page, and it shows the SJB and Sajid Premadasa have the most number of revenue increasing and revenue decreasing, because we understand that fundamentally we have to change the tax structure because it's extremely inequitable right now. So that's a major part of
closer to the election, everybody has been promising all sorts of things, right?
But not everybody is clear on how it's funded. So the SJB manifesto is very clear. If you lose revenue here, we're going to gain that revenue elsewhere. So that's very important to maintain a balanced budget.
Right. The other point they make is that he's an experienced leader and has a team that has performed. So by team, I think they're talking to about Kanchana, Shehan, Harin, Manusha, Jeevan.
Sure. There are caveats to all those performances. I think you can look at, for example, the Adani, I think the VFS camp. That's also part of this team, right? That's from this cabinet, right? So, and let the results speak for themselves.
Right. Okay. Is he breaking the Port to run it?
The Port is broken because they crashed the economy and the people no longer trust them. It has absolutely nothing to do with what Mr. Wickramasinghe says. So I don't know where they're getting these ideas from.
But that's what people are saying.
It's pretty crazy.
We see these narratives.
That's the only soundbite that's going to come out of it.
I don't understand. What did he do to break Port? The Port is broken because they screwed up the economy and half of their members supported Ranil Wickramasinghe and the rest of them supported that's
if at all, he's enabled them back onto a political stage.
If it weren't for Ranil Wickramasinghe, Wickremesinghe, the people by now would have voted the SLPP out of parliament. They wouldn't have a single seat in parliament. They would be so far away from the power centres in this country that you wouldn't be able to see them. Right? But right now, Mr. Namaraj, right now in the IHP polls, in the general election poll, the Pohottu is at 20%. It's at 20%. Only 10% off from the next person. So that's the effect of Mr. Wickremesinghe's stint in government.
Right. So the other thing that they do is they say, look at inflation, look at the stock market, the strength of the rupee, performance of bond markets.
Inflation, you said inflation. So inflation went up 70% 2 years ago. It's come down how many percent? The rate of inflation. So we so that's 70%.
Right now we're below.
Yeah, but that 70% inflation has not come down, right? Our cost of living has not reduced by 70%. No, has my income? My income hasn't gone up by 70%. Maybe yours has, but maybe Lulu's, but our incomes are not 70% up.
No, that's not correct. So central bank, their income went up.
Only the central bank.
Central bank went up,
and only the top earners, not the bottom rung, got only 20%.
Is it so?
Yes,
The
70% was the top rung.
Murtaza came and
I don't understand.
Completely inequitable, even that. So
when the stock market goes up, it's because anticipating a victory. When the stock market comes down, it's because
the stock market is a poor indicator of social well-being and economic well-being. I would not pay attention to
ours,
stock market, especially ours.
Do you know why the bond yields are coming down?
These are long stories.
Long stories.
I think
is that like too?
I don't want to go into that.
But they show it as an indicator that it's the investor confidence in a change of government. If they're reacting to the possibility of a change of government.
If they believe that investor confidence is the most important thing right now, that's one way of looking at it. But for me, what's more important is that we set the groundwork for industrialization in the economy, and we try to protect the poorest, most vulnerable people in this country before they become radicalized into violent
extremism. There's nothing about that in the RW manifesto. That's the point of view that we come from.
Look,
we come from a social
if you're
justice.
Worried about the JVP,
you know what I mean?
If you're worried about a communist takeover in the country, understand that even the previous iterations of the JVP had a lot to do with Sri Lanka's economy. It had a lot to do with people losing social services, being unable to provide for their families. It's not like in 1977 suddenly everyone woke up and read Karl Marx and became Marxists, right? Like let's be frank. It was material condition, the deterioration of your material conditions that leads people to political radicalization and then violent extremism. It's the most obvious thing that's happened.
Cause and effect. Nothing happens in a vacuum. That's true.
I would urge people to understand, if you're worried about a communist takeover or whatever, understand that the power is really with you. It's absolutely with you to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. So, two more questions. IMF will only support Ranil.
I mean,
no, it's in the advertising. It's in the the IMF. They use quotes with the faces of IMF officials.
I mean, I think you said this the other day, right?
State Department
when
officials.
We spoke, you have said in meetings where...
So let me say to the audience that I met with members of the IMF as part of the SJB's team, and we discussed some of the things that the SJB has been saying and about their targets and stuff. They were unequivocal that they are obviously going to support whoever comes in. And remember, an IMF program is something that is negotiated between the government and the IMF. It's not that we unilaterally say something or they unilaterally say something. It's a negotiation, and the SJB is a moderate liberal party. They will negotiate in a reasonable manner and renegotiate in a reasonable manner. So I don't think anyone has anything to worry about. The IMF is not an organization that has some sort of exclusive agency with one particular party in a country. It's a ridiculous assertion.
Right. They in fact announced that, no? Recently they
have to.
They announced that they will negotiate with whoever comes.
So this is...
But it's important to tell people that, the IMF has, for example, in Greece, one party negotiated the agreement. They were kicked out at the next election. Another party came in. They renegotiated the IMF. They were kicked out at the next election. The IMF worked with about 3 or 4 different parties in the space of 7 or 8 years. So
it's a repeating cycle. So final question: do we have to sacrifice governance for economic stability? Because that is the overarching argument that the current administration is making, right?
I think the clue is in the fact that the IMF themselves generated what's called the governance diagnostic report. The IMF themselves have placed governance failures at the center of our economic collapse. It was management failure. That's why our country collapsed.
Right.
Our country was one of 45 other countries that were in debt distress as per the IMF by 2022. But from those 45 countries, our collapse was among the top 5 in terms of rates of inflation, in terms of currency depreciation. Our country was one of the most stable countries heading into that situation because we had $7 billion in reserves. So it was basically a failure of management that led to our collapse. And management is essentially governance. And if you don't put governance structures in place, you're just heading for another collapse. So if someone is trying to develop this economy without installing governance structures, that is a project that's bound to fail. And I think most people understand it because everybody is saying it.
Yeah,
so except the president and his party.
Right. We also come from the point of view that a recovery built on weak foundations is eventually going to fail, right?
We'll be back here in a couple of years.
Some sort of a recurrence of, the kind of
so my final
that,
message to the audience is that the current trajectory is almost likely to guarantee another IMF program by 2030. That's my prediction.
Right.
We will be back in an IMF program of some sort
if
by
we don't
2030.
fix the governance issues.
If we don't improve our debt sustainability in the way we are going, because right now we are saying, we're just about meeting the IMF target, so we should be okay. I'm saying if we don't go beyond some of these IMF targets, you can almost guarantee that we will need the IMF again in 5 years, and you can forget about economic growth. You can forget about that.
Okay, well, let's see if Chaturanga agrees. He's here.
Thanks a lot everyone for having me. Appreciate the time.
Because we can't go with the time.
So actually, you guys have never met, right?
Yes,
so
we have
actually
met. So we can meet off camera.
I just heard what we were saying.
Right. So, Kusum, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome to hang around and listen to Chaturanga. I'm sorry we couldn't get into a debate. We wanted a proper smackdown.
I'm sure we have a lot of general election coming next year, so a lot of time for that.
A lot of time for that.
Maybe we can have a round table next time around. Thanks a lot.
Continue with this.
Yeah, no, we'll give Chaturanga the chance. So Kusum, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I think we'll end this particular the
live
party live now,
Yeah.
and then we'll start a new one with Chaturanga.
Cool.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Lulu,
Thanks a lot.
Annie Aubrey, Chris, and the team. And all the very best with the election to come.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, CK.
How long did we go on for? We went for
We went for a while.
a bit longer.
About an hour.